Hi, everyone, and welcome to this podcast. Now, I have a very special guest for today from Austin, Texas. I'd like to welcome Alain Dormehl. Alain, very warm welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks a lot, Avash. It's fantastic to be here.
Excellent. So, Alain, just tell us a little bit about your role and what you do there for Microsoft at Corp.
Uh, sure. So I'm a principal program manager with the Azure SQL engineering team, and a lot of sort of what I look after is sort of feature related, and there's a lot of the back end pieces around, how do we build customers? What does our infrastructure look like that we deploy on? So there's a lot of work that I do that sort of, customers probably never see, but it's all sort of, I sit on the engineering side of the organization. So we sort of drive all of the improvements in product where SQL deployments in Azure are concerned.
Cool. Um, and I'm guessing just by looking at that, we think about things like digital transformation, doing new stuff using the cloud technologies, which we'll talk about in a second, that couldn't possibly even be done previously. What does disrupt, define, discover mean for you?
Yes, I mean it's a good question. I mean, a big part of what I look at in my role is um, sort of the competitive landscape, and I think different in my role, but I think everyone can sort of relate to that problem in that, I think with the advent of some of the sort of these sort of cloud-born companies, you think about the sort of the Ubers and the Airbnbs of this world, as cliche as those examples are, but like everyone from a Microsoft through to someone like Standard Bank and even small companies always are sort of on the lookout for, well, what's this next big thing, right? You either gonna be there and adopting as part of the first wave, or you're gonna get disrupted with someone who's doing it before you, right? So I think a big part of that is sort of understanding your own sort of business culture, understanding how your industry is moving, and then sort of trying to adapt to that by through technology, right? And so Microsoft lives and breathes that every day. Have we have to think about customer focus, we have to think about competitive landscape, all the while still innovating inside our product suites.
Yeah. So I think, Elaine, that takes care of the intro. Now it's going to get more exciting and maybe challenging. I'm going to challenge you a bit, right? First question, in a nutshell, why are banks moving to the cloud?
So it's a good question, and I think it relates very much to sort of the previous answer as well. In that, I think that question you could replace the word bank with kind of any industry, right? We're seeing the adoption of cloud sort of as a whole scale movement that all of our customers are doing across all segments, right? You have government customers, you have private sector, you have banking, you have insurance. Everyone is doing this move into the cloud, and I really think that the big sort of drivers we're seeing is the scale of economics that exist in that world, right? Like a company like Microsoft can sort of run these data centers, operate these data centers at scales that our customers just can't do. But what that does enable our customers to do is it allows them to focus on the things that matter to them. And that's innovation, sort of driving core business competencies. If a lot of your management hassles are um, sort of taken care of for you, you really get to focus your resources on the things that matter to you, right? And I'm sure, like within the banking industry, we've seen a lot of disruption in that space already with some of the sort of, I guess, the new age online banks that are sort of emerging and taking some of the market share. And I feel like traditional banking is almost playing a role where they're trying to sort of make sure that their industry is is innovating but also doesn't get disrupted to the point where
Yeah.
it becomes a free for all, right? So I definitely think that sort of scale of economics that exists there, your reach to customers, right? Like where previously, if you wanted to expand in a new country, it was a it was a big exercise. I have to go buy a building, I have to go put servers in it, I have to hire people. Now with cloud, you can deploy in a new country in minutes, right? It's like that's
Absolutely.
that's kind of the power that you have with these things. So I really think there is an argument to be made for sort of why we're seeing it. Some industries faster than other industries, but I think I definitely think, having dealt with various banking customers around the world, they're definitely on the forefront of the thinking, how cloud gets adopted. And probably most importantly, they're driving a lot of the security and compliance conversations
Yeah.
that I guess everyone's benefiting from.
Yeah. I mean, so what you're saying is, as a bank, you need to innovate while defending. And the last thing you want is to worry about an ever growing, ever more complex IT footprint. And that's why cloud is just a no-brainer for these modern banks. But
Absolutely.
then, Elaine, you and I are data guys, right? We've been on the data side of things for many, many years. Where is this world of data going now? Obviously, we're seeing a lot of success in moving data specific projects to the cloud. We've heard for many years that the data is the most important thing. There's phrases like data is the new oil. We've heard that for many years. But where's data going now with all these cloud technologies?
Yeah, I mean, it's so like I always have this thing that I tell customers where it's like, well, I always challenge customers and I tell them, like, if you can show me an application that doesn't use data, then we can end this conversation
Yeah.
right away, right? Like, there's nothing for us to talk about. So like I agree, like there is this big impetus around data and how we sort of do it. But I think a lot of what we've seen in the industry, sort of in the last couple of years, and probably what'll be coming, is a lot more um, sort of interactions and integrations between services that exist, right? Like if you look at your traditional data landscape, it was very complex. You had a reporting layer, you had a analytics layer, you had a storage layer, you had querying. There was a lot of complexity that lived here. And I think a lot of what customers are pushing us towards is this world where, like, those boundaries sort of melt away, right? Like, where the data is the focal point, not the product you're storing the data in, right? Like, I should collect and store data once, and I should be able to compute over it any way I want. And that's really where you think about something like, like where Synapse is sort of really making a lot of ground. There is that they're offering this service that sort of can do analytics over data. It doesn't matter where it lives, right? So if you have data that lives in a database, that's fine. You don't have to move it out the database. Moving your data becomes very expensive, right? So
Yeah.
I think a lot of what we're seeing is just this convergence of products into almost like I want to say almost like a data platform, right? Like, as cliche as that word is, but where your focal point is really the data and the people who have to access it, not the products. The
Right.
products should be the enabler, not the defining feature of that data, right?
Right.
Um, so that's a lot of what we're seeing, right? And you sort of look at some of the technologies that my team have invested in, like the hyperscale storage technology for SQL that runs in Azure, right? That is sort of testament to things that can only be done in the cloud, where we've pretty much taken the storage engine of SQL, we've completely broken it down and containerized it, and we've now given customers a storage engine that scales on the horizontal, not vertically anymore. So gone are the days of you having these massive monolithic SQL servers that run like 200 cores. You can have a 2-core SQL server, a SQL compute node attached to 100 terabytes of data, right?
Right.
You would never have been able to do that in your own data center. So, I mean, there are a lot of these examples of sort of where we see things moving, but I think where um, probably one of the most interesting pieces for us is around sort of security and compliance. It's just around, you know, SQL does a lot of work in that space. And you look at sort of the announcement of Purview recently, which is almost like it's a catalog for data management across your estate. So you
Yeah.
can sort of have this lineage tree that sort of understands where all your data assets are, how they are tagged, and this can be done cross product now. So now you start entering into this world where you can start assigning sort of access and the ways that people use data per data set, not per product, right? Like, and as I was saying, like, I think the focal point is moving away from the product centric to more the data centric, right? Like, data is really the asset that people
Yeah.
care about.
Yeah.
Um, So there's a lot of these things that are happening, but I think sort of the net theme here is just we're sort of seeing this blurring of lines between, oh, this used to be my transactional system, and this used to be my data warehouse, and this used to be my reporting, where now it's more a case of like, well, this is my data and I need to do something with this data.
Right.
What product we put there seems to become less relevant. But the fact is something still has to be there that can do this sort of variety of tasks.
So if I understand you correctly, right, you store all your data in the cloud in one place. The cloud has the capability to handle all types of data. Your product, of which there would be many, focuses on serving the business needs. We bring the processing to the data, the flexibility to the data, like you mentioned, 100 terabytes in just 2 cores in a certain application. There's all these scenarios that are only really possible with cloud. But then I'm going to challenge you. As I said, Alain, it's not going to be easy today. Why then Azure for your data?
So, Sonny, this is again, like you can, my answer to this is probably super biased because I work for Microsoft. But like I said, I mean, one of the things that I do really focus a lot of my time on is competitive analysis, like, sort of across the landscapes that we do. And I really think one of the areas where genuinely like our products are sort of head and shoulders above the rest is from a security and compliance perspective, right? Like we have put a lot of effort into ensuring that like our platform has sort of no loopholes where sort of customers have to worry about those things. Because like from a banking perspective, not even from a banking perspective, any customer, if you are unsure about the storage of your data, who has access to that data, all of these things, that then becomes a sort of your primary focus. And like we have invested a lot of time, a lot of effort into these things. And you just have to look at some of the recent announcements we made sort of with SQL Ledger, right? Like where you can now have this sort of unquestionable record that can be audited to ensure that data hasn't been tampered with, right? And this all runs natively inside the SQL engine, for example. So a lot of these things, right? Like we have double encryption coming, we have sort of role-based access control things that are coming. So a lot of this focus around, how you secure data, but without it becoming this massive burden to the people that need to use the data or where the data needs to go to be processed, right? And that's really, again, like where a product like Purview is going to be central to that story because, for example, Purview can assign access to data for the data set, not for the product. Right. So like if I have access in product 1, it should be applicable in product 2, right? Like, because that's how it should work, right? So I really think that's an area where we've put a lot of energy in, and it's definitely starting to show, right? Like you just look at some of the big sort of contracts that Microsoft has been involved in lately, government contracts, these sort of things. A lot of that just wouldn't be possible if there were any questions about the security and reliability of how we store data, how we govern data in our own environments.
So we're doing new types of security, new types of applications on top of your data. But I want to ask you another interesting question, right? Now, you and I were two guys that were involved in MPP solutions early on in South Africa, and that enabled really big data warehouses on-prem. Now, with all this cool stuff that you're talking about in the cloud, is the data warehouse dead?
I mean, we get this. Well, I mean, this question comes up a lot, and I think the answer to that is I guess it depends on your definition of data warehouse, right? Like the traditional data warehouse that, I mean, again, like what we started on. Yeah, I think those have limited use in today's society because, well, I mean, in today's working world, because they're very limiting in what they can do. They're sort of limited to a specific type of data and a specific type of operation. And I really think, like, again, you look at something like Synapse where they're sort of changing that paradigm and they're saying, hey, like storing of this data and sort of access to this data is central to our product. How you choose to compute across it is kind of the key here, right? So if you're comfortable with something like with some type of in-memory processing engine, or if you're comfortable in R versus Python, or if you're comfortable in SQL versus, I don't know, MongoDB, for example, those choices should now no longer be defining of where you go put your data. And I think that's really where the data warehouse is moving, right? Like, I think 5-10 years ago, the sort of everyone was focused on like, oh, well, how do we just push all of the data into this data warehouse? And I think we sort of slowly realized that that's actually very hard to do, right? Like trying to push, 50 terabytes of JSON data into what is ultimately a relational schema is highly inefficient, right? So instead of trying to do something like that, why not just leave the JSON where it is and figure out a way to sort of mount those files and compute through them, right?
Which
And
is
that's
what
really where we're going.
Which is
Yeah,
what Synapse does very well with Polybase, which I think is a bit of a differentiator in some of the use cases there, right? Let's talk then. Let's pivot to the OLTP side. Let's not forget our friends on the OLTP side. Anything interesting coming there? Maybe SQL Insights, if you're allowed to talk about that.
yeah. So that's actually one of the products that I work on. So I absolutely can talk about it. So so SQL Insights is going to be coming. Well, I mean, it's already in preview for customers on Azure SQL. But essentially, what you have here is you have a platform that'll be sort of launching with your database that enables you to now sort of have a centralized view of all of your observability data. So all of your like telemetry that comes out of the database, that can be performance related. It can be just sort of uptime related. We allow customers to sort of, I guess the whole purpose of SQL Insights is like we're trying to build a platform here where we give customers all the freedom to choose, what data they want to collect, where they want to go store it, how often they want to collect it, and what they actually want to do with it in the end. So how do you want to consume all of this data? So you can imagine a world where you have 1,000 databases deployed in Azure, but you can monitor and alert on all of these databases from a single place, right? Like that's every DBA's dream, is to like have this one pane of glass where everything's just working and like, oh, there's an alert, I need to go look at that alert. And it becomes easy because everything's there. And then sort of a big part of what we're working on with that platform is sort of automation around taking away some of those administrative burdens that exist within sort of a SQL world today, right? Like, oh, this database is underperforming. Can we generate an auto RCA for that, right? So that customers don't have to spend all of that time investigating every single reason why a database could possibly be slow.
Yeah.
I mean, Microsoft has a multi-million database deployment in production in the form of Azure today. So we have all the knowledge, we have all the expertise, we have all the data to build these sophisticated models that will help customers run their own environments.
I mean, it's so exciting. I'll tell you what, if you're a DBA, SQL Insights is exactly what you've been waiting for. I think you're going to love this, right? Exclusive to, well, is it going to be for Azure SQL DB? What's the target platform on this?
So today, so within the scope of the preview, it is only Azure-based deployments. However, we do sort of at least say that it's any type of SQL. So you can deploy SQL running inside of a virtual machine. You can deploy it for managed instance, elastic pool, single database. So any SQL environment is acceptable. Part of our roadmap is absolutely to look at these hybrid scenarios. So how do we take this same collection agent and allow customers to deploy that in their own environments through potentially something like Arc? So we're definitely looking at this as a platform that spans an entire estate, not necessarily like point in time, like here's a solution for Azure, right? Like we understand that observability is a very sensitive thing for customers, and having this disjointed story becomes hard. So we are definitely looking at how can we do this sort of everywhere.
No, I'm very excited about it, especially if your job is to manage large amounts of SQL. I think this is going to be hugely popular. Alain, we need to start wrapping up. We're almost out of time. So just on the theme of why Azure for your data, anything else you'd like to add? Any great examples of some case studies? I mean, you have a global view on what customers are doing. Anything cool that you've seen recently?
I mean, there's always great customer stories out there that we see all the time, and I think some of the most public ones you just have to sort of like search these things out. But there are some of the largest telecommunication companies in the world to some of the largest logistics companies in the world have all recently sort of either renewed or signed up for new contracts for Azure, right? And I think and that plus sort of the US government having sort of committed to certain Azure-based deployments. I think a lot of those things, when you look at these very big customers that run on scales that are, incomparable to sort of your average customer, that's a huge vote of confidence for our platform. And it's really we love to see those workloads coming because it sort of validates a lot of the work that our team puts in, a lot of the effort that our team puts in. Like the things that our customers never see is that yes, Azure's there, Azure's always available, Azure's always serving you. But what a lot of people never see is that behind Azure, there's thousands and thousands of support engineers, feature engineers, PMs, everyone that's just ensuring that every little expectation that the customer has of our platform is always being met. So like those are really sort of like the unsung heroes for everything we do here. And I just feel like when these big customers sign up, that's sort of validation for the things that we do behind the scenes every day to keep everyone happy.
No, very, very important point. Alain, I just want to thank you once again for joining us. This was very, very interesting. To the viewers, I mean, it was like 6 a.m. in Texas when Alain recorded this. So very kind of him to join us. Those of you watching, I do hope that you enjoyed it and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you.